Interreg, EU Interreg North Sea region project. We've been given funding by them. And yes, I will now also try to share the video that I have. Just bear with me.
I think what ProCirc does in one sentence is that it's about sharing knowledge on how you can use procurement to accelerate the shift from a linear economy towards a circular economy.
So today we're at the construction site for Centrum, which is the first circular building in Belgium. It's an office building that has been commissioned by CAMC, and CAMC is one of our partners in ProCirc. And so this building is very special in itself as they try to innovate more circular principles, but it will also become a learning hub for circular construction in the future. And for ProCirc, the pilot was in the procurement. So they had a fixed budget and they challenged the market to come up with innovative solutions and form consortia.
We have been running a pilot on furniture. And in this pilot, we have focused on reusing as much furniture as possible, to redesign furniture, and also to adopt furniture from other public organizations. And in this pilot, we have managed to save 100,000 euros. We have avoided the emissions of 50 tons of CO2 equivalents, and we have also avoided the waste generation of 30 tons. So the pilot has been very successful, and we're eager to share the results with other organizations as well.
So one of our actions in ProCirc is the creation of a circular procurement toolbox. So we have created this toolbox to help procurers, and they're able to filter tools depending on the stage they're at in their procurement journey. And we like to accompany this with minimum circular requirements. So we're trying to help these people each step of the way to gain as much knowledge as they can to make their procurement more circular.
The way we are going to disseminate the results of ProCirc is that we are going to arrange webinars and workshops. We will also have reports coming, summarizing the key lessons learned in the project. But also we have a separate high-level policy group who's working on policy recommendations that we are also going to disseminate to the European Commission and also to other influential policy makers.
So this will allow us to share what we've learned on policy and how policy can help implement circular procurement in Europe.
So that was a brief introduction video about the project. We started end of 2018 and we will finish in June this year. So we're in the final stages of the project. I see a hand, maybe Mr. or Mrs. Haridas would like to say something, or?
Sorry, it was a mistake. I'm
Okay.
at the moment.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Thank you. So yes, so now that we continue in the presentation, I would also like to know a little bit about the audience that we have. So I invite you to go to the Mentimeter and use this code. And we prepared 3 questions for you. Where are you from? From which organization, what kind of organization are you from? And which topics would you like to know more about? So if you can briefly go to the Mentimeter, please. Oh, that looks, yes, so many people from Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, of course. I also see France, Greece, Israel, Italy, Taiwan. That's far away. You're in a totally different time zone, I think. The Mentimeter code, I will put it in the chat. But many people from Belgium, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Yes. And Scotland as well. Yes, nice, nice. It's nice to see we have such a big, different nationalities. Also Mexico, I saw it's also a different time zone. Very early in the morning, I think. Welcome, everybody. Maybe to go to the next question, what type of organization are you from? If you're from from a different type that's not here, maybe you can say in the chat what type of organization you are from. I also see, many municipalities and national public authorities, but also NGOs. It's fairly well distributed. Yeah. Ah, yes, a training organization. Yes. Yeah. Ah, yes. University. Yes. Yeah. And research institutes. Yes. Very diverse group, I think. So thank you. That's very good for sharing experiences, I think. Maybe to go to the next question. So which topics would you like to know more about? Related to circular procurement, of course. We're also asking this because in the 11th of May, we have an offline event, so a live event in Brussels. So we can also incorporate maybe some of the topics you would like to know more about. Yes. Oh, that's good. I see measuring impact and how to measure results. Yes, I think those will be addressed in the first session we have. And I also saw organizational change. Yes, we will also get to that one in the second session. So that's really good. Criteria, I see. Products as a service. Mm-hmm. Ah, yes. Measurements and durability. Yes, today, unfortunately, we will not go very deeply into the different pilots. And the social criteria will also not address, but we will surely keep it in mind. How to get various departments interested in circular public procurement. I think that will maybe come back in the session on organizational change. Yes, perfect. Thank you. And also, if you think of something later, please put it in the chat. It's not a problem, of course. All right, thank you very much. I think we can now go to the first session. So that will be Mervyn Jones and Monica Sanchez-Groeneweg. Can I give you the floor?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Lika. Well, welcome everybody. So excited to have you here. And I was also very happy to see how many are interested in the topic of setting goals and monitoring. How do we actually measure impact? I think this is the golden question. So yeah, let's start off with maybe an introduction of both me and my colleague, Mervyn Jones. I'm an advisor in circular procurement at Rijkswaterstaat, which is the Dutch executive organ of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And we work a lot with strategic use of circular procurement on both national and international level, and are also a lead partner here in the ProCirc project. Mervyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, my name's Mervyn Jones. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you who are attending the workshop. I'm a colleague of Monica's similar role, circular procurement advisor to the Rijkswaterstaat, and we've taken part in a number of European projects now in terms of using circular procurement, using procurement as a mechanism to accelerate the transition towards a more circular economy. So thank you. Welcome.
Yes, next slide maybe. All right, why are we here? Well, like we said before, we're accelerating the circular economy through circular procurement. And this is exactly what we're trying to do here in ProCirc. We're experimenting, but also implementing and learning from different pilot projects that we have. These are more than 30 pilot projects that we've learned experiences from. And we've also set our own goals during this project. So we focused on each pilot to reduce, well, with the aim to reduce between 20 and 25% of raw materials, waste, and CO2 emissions. Not only that, we are developing lots of different tools through these experiences, like circular procurement frameworks, existing of minimum circular requirements, transnational implementation roadmaps, circular procurement toolbox, and also policy recommendations. So that's also very useful side notes. And next to that, also a little bit of the legacy of our project is organizing a transnational procure-to-procure learning and action program, circular procurement, expert task forces, and in transnational and cross-industry communities of practice. Next. We have a concise but very interesting agenda for you. So Mervyn will introduce the topic more. What are our expectations, requirements, and feasibility of monitoring? Then we have two excellent pilots examples from our ProCirc projects, and that's Christian Tangeda from DFO, and from the Ministry of the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate, Johan Rodehuis. After which we'll do a Mentimeter exercise. So I do attend to all of you to have your phone ready so we can just jump on there and yeah, get your inputs as well. You can always put your questions in your own language, either English or Dutch, Flemish, Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish in the chats, and we have colleagues there that can respond to your questions. Next.
Okay, thanks, Monica. I'll take over from here. One of the beautiful things about talking about circular economy is when you think about a circle, you have no single point of entry. There are multiple points, in fact 360 points of entry, one for every degree. And very often when we talk about a procurement cycle, monitoring and reporting comes right at the very end, and we tend not to focus as strongly on monitoring and reporting. So it's really nice in this particular workshop that we've actually put monitoring and reporting right at the beginning, because there's actually no point in trying to do something different from the way we were doing it before if we don't actually think about how we evaluate whether what we do differently has actually made a difference or even worked. Has it made a positive difference, or has it made a negative difference, or has it made no difference whatsoever? So the function of monitoring and effective reporting is really to understand what the interventions, what the differences that we're trying to make are doing in terms of our procurement. And particularly when we talk about public procurement, when we're spending public sector money, which is ultimately the taxpayers' money, the citizens' money, this has to demonstrate good value. And the governance in terms of public procurement is very strong aspect of it. But we can do so much, as Monica said, with it. We can be far more strategic with our use of public procurement in terms of helping to encourage and to accelerate this transition to a more circular economy. So why monitoring? It gives us a clear and concise information on what is happening. It tells us whether what we've done has worked or not. It monitors the impact of the interventions, some things we put in, whether it's criteria, whether it's a change in business model. These can make a big difference or they can make a small difference. So it gives us the size of the scale. It also helps us understand the risk, because whenever we do anything different, there is some element of risk. Whenever we make a public sector purchase, or even in the private sector a purchase or a procurement opportunity, there is always risk attached. So it helps in terms of assessing what the level of risk is, where the risk lies within the procurement process, and how we can mitigate, how we can look to actually reduce that risk as much as possible. It allows us to assess new possibilities. I mentioned just very briefly a moment ago, business models. Again, there are multiple alternate models to just simply purchasing ownership, the linear economy, buying something, using it, and then paying somebody else to actually get rid of it, to manage with the waste that we produce. So there's a number of different opportunities that we can do, but we have to look at those before we get into the actual tender process. And it can help us assess overall progress against SMART objectives. And by SMART, we mean specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time. So there's no point in having an objective if it's at the wrong time within the procurement process. And the procurement process is a dynamic process. I've talked about it being circular. It's a circle. So there are things we can do at different parts of that circle, in different parts of that cycle. And again, ultimately, whatever we're doing, whether we're in the public sector or the private sector, it's about continual improvement. It's about continual development. So just a few of the reasons why monitoring is important. And it was good to see in the chat and in the Mentimeter exercise we just did that people are really keen to understand more about how we monitor and report. It was mentioned that we had over 30 pilots in the ProCirc Interreg project. Each of those projects, each of those pilots had to undertake a certain level of monitoring and reporting. And again, what that highlighted, and what the reports that we're now producing have highlighted, shows very, very clearly that there is no one size fits all. Different projects require different metrics, they require different key performance indicators, and they also require different approaches to monitoring and reporting. And these 30 different pilots have come from all different aspects of public procurement. So they highlight some of the realistic challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis when we're doing that. And there's no better way, I think, of actually understanding what some of these challenges are and what some of the opportunities are than to hear from the actual pilots themselves. So what I'd now like to do is to hand over to one of our partners, Christian from the DFO in Norway, to just explain a little bit more. You saw Christian on the video right at the very beginning, but he's here in person to explain a little bit more about one of the pilots. So I'm going to stop presenting, pass over to Christian, and look forward to your presentation, Christian.
Let's see. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Mervyn. My name is Christian Tagne, and I work for the Norwegian Agency for Public and Financial Management, also called the DFØ, and more specifically in the Department for Green and Innovative Public Procurement. We are the competence center for green public procurement in Norway, and we give advice to all public organizations in Norway. For me, I specialize in the procurement of furniture and ICT and circular procurement, and I have an academic background also consisting of quantitative environmental impact assessments, cycle assessments. So data-driven and facts-based decision-making when it comes to green public procurement is very close to my heart. And the info in this presentation is based on both experiences of advising public organizations in Norway, but also a pilot that we ran in DFØ as part of the ProCirc project. In this pilot, we were moving offices from 2 office buildings. Let's see. Oh, sorry about that. 2 seconds. Yeah, we were moving offices from 2 office buildings to a new office building, and we had a goal of reusing as much furniture as possible in that transition. So what goal should you set when you are in a situation, for instance, especially when you're moving offices and the potential for throwing away useful or usable furniture is very high? Well, first of all both of these 2 alternatives were a bit better than in our pilot, where we had more of a qualitative goal, where we said that we would reuse as much furniture as possible. In the process, we discovered that this was interpreted differently by different people in the organization. So that led to less reuse compared to if we had a more quantitative goal, which both of these alternatives that you see in front of you signifies. So at the start of the project, we thought it would actually have been better if we managed to have a CO2 reduction target. But one other alternative would be to have a percentage of the furniture that would covered in a circular manner target. So that probably requires a little bit of explanation. So the alternative to the circular target, that would be any action to cover one's furniture need that is not the procurement of new furniture. So in other words, it is the percentage of furniture need covered through circular actions, such as reuse of existing furniture, maintenance and repair, buying used furniture, or also redesigning old furniture. In the start of this pilot, we thought that actually the CO2 reduction target would be better, but it turns out that it's too complex to actually be very useful in such a moving processes because of, for instance, all of the involved parties that has to understand the goal. So because of this, based on the experience from this pilot and also advising public organizations, I believe that the goal that you should set for a circular furniture transition should rather be to set a circular target. For instance, that you should cover your furniture need in 95% of it should be covered in a circular way. That should be that only 5% of the need is covered by procuring new furniture. This KPI is easier to understand by decision makers, and by decision makers I both mean on a leadership level, but also by the procurers that are going to procure the furniture that is needed in, for instance, a moving process. Also, it's easier to measure and evaluate whether you reach this percentage target or not. It's easier to see how many furniture pieces you procured new and how many you reused, for instance, or how many you reused through repair. etc. So one quote from business analytics expert Jay Leibowitz is that an effective KPI is one that prompts decisions and not additional questions. And that's why I believe such an overarching target, such as the circular target, is preferable. So to illustrate for you guys how this can work in an example where you're relocating to new offices. As you see to the left here, that's a best practice scenario where you have 95% of the need of furniture covered in a circular manner. And to the right, you see a baseline scenario, which I think is more common, at least in Norway. So to the left, you see that a lot of the need of furniture is covered through reuse, and that is reused without refurbishment. Most likely you have a lot of furniture that can just be transferred to your new office locations. But then you also have some that can be reused with some refurbishment. Maybe you need to repair something on the office desk or the office chair. And then you can also redesign. Maybe you have some old file cabinets that cannot be used. Maybe they can be redesigned to something else that is useful. And also maybe you can attain used furniture either for free from other organizations. We did that in our pilot, and we saved, I think it was 15,000 euros just from this. Or you could also procure used furniture. What happens usually in the baseline scenario is that maybe you don't have an agreement to buy used furniture, and you don't try to look for used furniture in other organizations. So that means that you don't do any of this. Also, redesign is not as common unless you have like very specific circular goals. And one other thing is that, of course, you try to reuse as much as possible of your existing furniture. And maybe you, for instance, try to change your desktop tables. So to a certain extent, you can say that the baseline scenario is circular, but not as much in the best practice scenario. Also in the pilot, of course, I'm not saying that you should not try to measure your CO2 impacts, but for decision making, as long as you know that the decisions you are making make sense from a circular perspective, you should do them. But you can also, if you have the resources, try to measure the impact. And I'm not expecting you to see what is here on the Excel sheet. But basically what we did here is that we have 3 different scenarios, and we tried to estimate the carbon footprint of new furniture, but also the procurement of used furniture. Or for instance, if you repaired an office chair, you changed the textile, what would be the carbon footprint from that? But we identified that it's possible to do this, but you have to have a lot of knowledge. And it's very hard to get very precise results. Nevertheless, it is the results that can facilitate or motivate, especially the leadership or other organizations, to do the same, and to do the same process. So that's why I think even though the results that we attained was imperfect, by the way, this is not the same results from the pilot that I mentioned. This is from another example. That's why the numbers are slightly different. But here you can see from the example that you saw that you would save 14 tons of CO2, you would save 40 tons of waste, and you could also save money. And as mentioned, the results are based on rough estimations and a lot of assumptions. But nevertheless, I think it illustrates the point, and that is that circular procurement, it can both save the environment, but it can also, in many instances, save money. And then one final message, and that is when we give advice to public organizations in Norway, and especially people who are not sustainability managers,
sometimes the monitoring part can feel a bit intimidating, and sometimes it can be an obstruction towards action. And I think we need to be pragmatic when it comes to this. We need to set simple goals, of course, based on facts, but we won't have perfect data to drive our decision making. But we need sustainability action now, and then we need to accept that some of the data, it will be imperfect, because the alternative is, it's really not an alternative, so we cannot hesitate. So that was it for me, and thank you for your attention, and please ask questions in the chat.
Thanks very much, Christian. Oh, sorry, Monica, you go ahead.
No worries. Yeah, no, there were just a few questions for you, Christian, in the chat. Maybe we can look at a few. There was one question about, for example, the total investment of the projects. How much was that?
The total investment of the project. Well, actually, like we didn't need a larger budget to do the circular scenario, because we saved some money, but I'm not sure if that answers the question. Mentioned that one challenge is that often when you're moving offices, you get a certain budget to procure new furniture. And that's a challenge if you then use this money to procure new furniture instead of keeping the ones that you have. So I think it's important to have like such goals that we set here, because then you would rather use this money to do, for instance, redesign, which is more costly than just procuring new furniture.
All right. I think
yes,
there was
and I can
also...
share the Excel sheets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mervyn, did you have any other comments?
No, there's an interesting chat going on in the chat function, so please use that because there's some really good comments coming up. But if in the interest of time, if we could just move on now to Johann's presentation, just to give another example from the ProCirc pilots of how the challenges of monitoring and reporting have been addressed. So over to Johann. Thank you. Is Johann there? Lovely. Thanks, Johann. You are muted, by the way, at the moment.
Thanks. Okay, my name is. You see now the full. Oh, not again. Yeah, this works. Hi, my name is Johan Rodehuis. I work for the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy. I'm a sustainability advisor for one of the government-wide categories called ICT Workspace for the Dutch central government. And within the government, we work with a category management system. So we're split up into 20 different categories, all focusing on a different set of generic procurement. And we're mostly focused on, ICT Workspace for all the government buildings, all the employees of the Dutch government, and we divided them into give or take 12 government-wide contracts focused on ICT hardware for one aspect and telecom-related contracts on another aspect. So we do all the wonderful IT products like smartphones, laptops, tablets, but also all displays, audio-visual products. You can think about printers, but also two-factor authentication, SMS gateway, inbound, outbound numbers for the whole, for all the major governmental institutions. But we also work for some high councils of state, some advisory boards, and some courts. In total, we do about 165 million euros a year. And the project I'm going to highlight The question was for Christian just now as well, the same. So we do about 475 million euros is about the contract value of the contracts I'm going to talk about. So you have a little bit of an indication. That sounds maybe like a big number or not, but it's not if you look at it from a worldwide market perspective. The IT market is, of course, a worldwide organized market, which is more or less the same in every country. So in that light, it's not that much money. So we look for a lot of collaboration, of course, internationally to realize the goals of circularity and the Paris Climate Agreement. Within the category, we tend to show our ambitions in what we call an ambition web. It's a tool which is used broadly within the government in the Netherlands to show on which focus areas you can put the most attention within your category or within your procurement project. And for IT, it's mostly focused on the most impact we can generate on energy and climate, on circular economy, focus on living environment, and also on the human rights and ethics aspect. A little bit less on more the social aspects within the country, because of course we work a lot of we work in international supply chain, so it's there's not that much national services being involved in all of our contracts, so it's a little bit less. But if we can, we also focus a little bit more on those aspects in our procurement cycles. But because we're quite a big category, we do a lot of market consultations throughout the year or for specific projects to make sure we put the right focus on the right type of procurement cycle. And what's really important is that we always put a minimum of 50-50 price quality into our projects. So it's a policy aspect, but it's also if you do less, you don't get any sustainable value within your contracts. And I expect for the next procurement cycle it will be more 30-70% than 50-50. And in the 2021 cycle, which was the project I'm now currently talking about, we did like almost 90% focus on sustainability award criteria. So to give you an insight what the exact way was within the procurement cycles. Because of time, I'm going to keep it a little bit simple. So how do we work with sustainability and CSR within our contracts within the category? We use like a 3-step rocket model in our contracts. So we use a couple of tools for that, which we think are really good, applicable within our market and our type of contracts. So first we work with an EcoVadis scorecard, which focuses on 4 sub-themes for as well resellers as major vendors. So those are sustainable procurement, sustainability, labor, and human rights and ethics. And those sub-scores all build up to one generic score. I'll give a score between 0 and 100, divided into 5 bandwidths, which all consist of like 20 or so points, with the average score is called good, which is somewhere around 45 to 55, and going up to all the way to advanced and outstanding. And we put that criteria into place to make it a division between companies which already put attention or gonna put attention to sustainability and circularity in general within their business, and give them a little bit of an edge, or make sure they step up within the government or within the contractual period. And we put that into place for resellers, but we put that on a minimum score of good, so that's an average score, but put in the goal of growing towards advanced within the period of the framework agreement. Why did we start with a score of average? That means it's because most of the parties are still evolving in that aspect, and we think that resellers don't have that much influence on the supply chain. The real effect on the supply chain you can find on the vendor, but due to a lot of indirect sales methods, you regularly don't have a contract with a vendor, but with a reseller. So we put in product criteria which focuses on the EcoVadis score of a vendor. So there are only products, for example, allowed with vendors which have a minimum score of advance, for example, for laptops and fat clients. So that also gives a little bit of a division on the market with that aspect. And we made sure we adapted them slightly for every contract we have to be a little bit aligned with the market, be ambitious but not over demanding, so you can let the market get used to it and grow towards a certain score. So you see now in the point 2 on the contractual requirements, you see the different scores for every contract we have, and the growing mechanism which is behind. We can also already see, for example, IWR 2021 started with partial, so it's the second to lowest score actually in the mechanism of EcoVadis. But we now are currently working on a big update round, and we can also already state that we're now requiring advance from the new contractual renewal period on. So it grew from partial towards advanced. That's about 40% growth in scores on that market. So you can already see the mechanism working actually. But we also use certifications, of course, we put into place. So that's T-shirt certified for laptops and displays, for example. Those contracts we work with an obligation with that criteria. So all products are T-shirt certified, no more, no less. So that's a 3-step rocket we put into place. And we use some other aspects regarding climate and circularity to create more data. So I'm going to show you some data, which dashboards we created 2 years ago. And this is the data still from 2021. We're currently working on the update with all the data of 2022, but we're going through a verification process to make sure that everything we got is correct and complete, so that we got a nice, correct overview of and a comparison with all the data we got from the last couple of years to make sure it's representable. So currently working on that. So this is still the 2021 data. I'm going to show you a little bit of.
Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes now, so
yeah,
if you could. Lovely, thank you.
So we created a dashboard which shows all the aspects regarding CO2, circularity, and sustainability. So we can see, for example, how we're performing on the aspect of the climate, the CO2 performance. So for this contract, I highlighted we saw a negative performance for that year, but regarding to all our contracts regarding hardware, CO2 footprint went down. So I'm going to show you in the next one. But because we had a corona pandemic, everybody bought more mobile devices. So we saw a rise in products, but an increase in CO2. You can also see the average CO2 footprint of our EcoVadis rating for as well resellers and our producers. The circularity aspect reduction in that in these contracts, this CSR component of the EcoVadis rating, but also the social return aspect. So how much the percentage of the value of the contract is going towards social return. What we also get is data of the CO2 footprint regarding all of our contracts aligned with the ambition of the Dutch climate agreement. We also have a climate neutral strategy of the Dutch government for 2030. That's of course a harder decline, and you can already see the CO2, the green one. Yeah, it's hard to read probably, but the green diagram is the target. The orange one is the gross footprint of the products, and the blue one is the net footprint. And you already can see the CO2 compensation mechanism put into place, as well as to decline the gross footprint from all the products we bought within the contracts. We also create all the data, an average footprint per product of all our specific the products you can buy within our contracts. And this is for the laptop contracts, for example. So you can easily see what the average footprint for every product is and make a strategic decision on it, based on all the same life cycle, same calculations behind it, so it's comparable. And we use it also to create an dashboard for EcoVadis scorecards. I blurred, of course, the names of the companies because we consider it commercial trustworthy information. So it's not something we normally publicize publicly, but it gives an insight to all the performance we see and also the growth within the scores over the years. We have an overview of where we compensate, for example, our product, the compensation of our products in the countries. So, for example, we do that in India, we do it in Burkina Faso, and in Rwanda. We started a new pilot in collaboration with the Fair Trade Climate Standard. So that's a smaller compensation standard which focuses not only on nature aspects but also on the human aspect of it. So it gives a nice insight. Also, combined with the SDGs, we try to contribute on. We get a lot of data from our waste compensation mechanism we put into place. So we see how much e-waste we get back, the amount of resources we get back from e-waste, which is transport back to Europe to go back into the through melting companies, gets back into the supply chain. And we all, in the end, we use all the data mostly to give recommendations to our policy advisors. So we can already tell where the most impact is being generated, so from the data we get. So we use that to give advices. Although we're, of course, a procurement category, we're not the ones responsible for it. We can give our policy advisors, of course, the tools and the information to make other decisions within the strategic decisions for their product portfolio. So we advise them to focus, for example, more on mobile-only concept, but also use our data as a strategic direction or an indication to reevaluate their product portfolio and make different setups to create a lower footprint. So this example you see right on the right at the bottom. It's all comparable with the calculations behind it.
Yeah, and we're going to have to wind up, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's the last one. So, we give them directions to choose for bring your own device, choose your own device, because if you look at the 10R circularity model, of course, the biggest changes you can get are the highest ones in the circularity model. So focus on refuse, reduce, and rethink. And extension of life cycle has a huge impact, of course, on CO2 reduction, and has a big impact on use of critical raw materials as well, and virgin raw materials. So if you use less, buy less, you of course need to focus on highly recycled content, then you have, of course, maximum impact on circularity as well. So that's a really short wrap up what we have within our project.
As you can probably tell, we could have done a whole workshop just on Johan's presentation and the whole workshop just on Christian's, but apologies, we do have to move this on. Thank you very much to both of you for that. And I think you've seen two very, very different examples of how monitoring and reporting can be used at a procurement tender opportunity stage, and also from a more strategic category management approach. So again, a range of examples there. There's lots of questions for Johan and for Christian in the chat. And if you have the opportunity, please, both the speakers, could you just have a look at some of those and respond to them? That would be fantastic. But in the meantime, if I could get everybody to go back to the Mentimeter just very, very quickly, and to either use the code or to use the QR picture, and then just answer the question in front of you about what elements of monitoring and reporting you're doing now. So just as a bit of a reaction, if you like, to see what you're doing now. We recognise here we've got people from every different global region, which is absolutely fantastic. So we have some answers coming in already. So a lot of the key point coming up at the moment on the top is making sure that when we are doing monitoring and reporting, we're actually feeding back the lessons we learn from previous tender exercises, from previous procurement opportunities into future procurement opportunities. And that's really important in terms of closing the loop and ensuring that we actually understand that what we've put into tenders in the form of whether they're performance-based specifications, whether they're technical requirements, whether these are working not just in terms of tender evaluation, but right through into contract management and the delivery of the goods or the services or the works that the public sector organisation is actually procuring. And then, as well as what you're doing now, based on what we've just been hearing from everyone, if I move the question on, what do you think is required for successful monitoring? And you've got a number of different options there. You can click more than one option. We're getting quite a nice even spread there across those who have responded. Thank you for responding. Just to keep this really brief, the short answer is you need a bit of everything. Again, when we talk about monitoring and reporting frameworks, these need to be coherent. So they need to come right at the beginning in terms of understanding the metrics and the baselines with which we're starting from. And you heard that in both Christian's and in Johan's presentations. But we also need practical key performance indicators and metrics. It's no point in having abstract metrics that the supply chain, the value chain, our suppliers, our contractors can't actually deliver on in terms of monitoring and reporting. So they have to be robust, they have to be practical, and we have to make sure that they're not just in the tender requirements, that they're followed through into contract management. And that requires an internal framework, and critical in this is that the people who do the procuring aren't always the people who actually do the contract managing. So making sure that the procurement and the contract management is a seamless function, that it's not doesn't have to be the same person, but there has to be a clear accountability and responsibility that transfers from the procurement process into the contract management process. And that is really a key part of what we call the procurement cycle. And then, as we saw in terms of current practice, making sure that we apply the lessons learned to future practice. Okay, just move on really. We haven't got time to do a plenary discussion. We've got the chats in the chat box. There's been lots of questions coming in. Please continue to ask those questions and we will continue to answer those questions in the chat function. But as you've seen already from a number of different references that have been put in there, there's an awful lot of information around monitoring and reporting as well as circular procurement in general. The recommendations we've found within the report from the 30 pilots and that we've produced into a summary document that will be available on the ProCirc website is that establishing a baseline to measure progress is vital. Working with experts in the sector, whether they're internal, whether it's peer-to-peer, or even in the supply chain through market engagement prior to tender, is important to understand which indicators are most relevant, not just to our own organisation, but are measurable by our suppliers. Working with those suppliers to identify methodologies in order to collect that data for monitoring of progress, and determining clear ownership and responsibility, as I've already mentioned, making sure that transfers into the contract management phase. And just from a behavioural perspective, it's really important that we're all starting in different positions. What happens in the Netherlands, what happens in Sweden isn't necessarily the same as what happens in other countries around the globe. So it's working within your own regulatory regimes. And there's always something that you can do in terms of continual improvement to ensure that we can actually improve the context, improve the delivery, the efficiency and the effectiveness of the public sector money that we're responsible for spending. And finally, don't forget to showcase results, both internally and externally, making sure that others can actually see what works and also, importantly, what doesn't work, so that they don't end up wasting effort by duplicating. So that's all we've got time for, I think, from our particular presentation. I will hand back to Lika, but please carry on putting stuff into the chat and we'll carry on trying to respond. Thank you very much for your time this morning, this afternoon and this evening, wherever you are.
Thank you very much, Mervyn. From one circular pilot to circular economy on everybody's lips. Can I give the floor to you, Alexandra van der Vijveren, Martin Pedersen-Stubb, Johanna Tunlit, and Emma Björsen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lika. And welcome to the session. You already did the introduction for us. Alexandra will be also joining us. She is Circular Economy Facilitator at Circular Flanders. Martin, our neighbor from Denmark, on the municipality. He is a project manager within Circular Economy. Hope you're all waving. I can't see you at the moment. Then I have my colleague from the city of Malmö, Johanna. She is a sustainability and circular coordinator at the centralized procurement unit. And myself, I'm a project manager in circular economy and I work for the environmental department in city of Malmö. And we will take you through this session. We will start with a 9-minute Malmö circular journey. Then Martin will continue with how to growing a sustainable mindset, how they've been working in Kolding. And then when you start thinking, what can I do? How can I get this going in my organization? Alexandra will give you tips on how to organize the change management workshop. Post question in the chat. We will try to answer them meanwhile, but also in the breakouts. So when Johanna and I started thinking about how can we summarize the lessons learned from City of Malmö with our circular journey, we of course looked at reports, templates, tools, and we found this interesting framework for organizational change management for sustainability, and it has a focus on implementing circular economy and circular procurement within organization. It was done in another EU-funded project, and it was created by a PhD student. It will be posted in the chat also, so you can have a link and look at this report. Today, we will mostly talk about the strategies for organizational change, but there will also be a longer talk where Johanna and I will talk more on the influencing factors also. And before getting into our journey, it's just nice so you know a little bit of a background. Procurement can be organized very differently in different countries and even within countries. In City of Malmö, the centralized procurement unit is responsible for municipality-wide contracts, so not construction, for instance. Procurement officers are responsible for all steps of procurement for the municipality-wide contracts, so including contract management. And there are 3 sustainability coordinators working at the centralized procurement unit. I will soon talk about 2 of them. Of course, champions are really important in this journey towards circular procurement, circular economy. And our journey started back in 2018, I would say, with Victoria and I were part of a project. And we wanted to try out our first pilot for circular economy. And Victoria really took this on. She became this advocate for circular economy at the procurement unit, and she was really important in getting this journey started. She's now moved on to further ventures, but Robin, as you see here to the right, he is taking on the circularity suit and continue really being a champion in this topic. And of course, also statements are important. And for instance, City of Malmö has a goal of becoming a net zero emission organization by 2030. And we also have goals on circular economy. And Of course, training and awareness raisings are key elements to getting organizational change. This also started for us in 2018. We had a series of workshops, seminars. We started with the basic, what is circular economy? How can we benefit from it? What does it mean for us? Then we had other municipalities presenting for us. We had businesses with the circular business models presenting, and we started like digging into this topic. And then we had trainings focusing only on circular procurement. Actually, Mervyn was there, who you heard presented earlier, and also a friend from the Dutch government. And expert recruitments. These are two key persons in our work, and you see Lisa to the left here. She's really been a key person for getting City Malmö on board this like circular train. She was recruited about 4 years ago. She's a coordinator at the centralized procurement unit and worked with environment. And she's really dedicated, and she's really strategic in how she implements the circular requirements. And then to the right here, we have Johanna. She was recruited 2 years ago within the ProCirc project, but her position as circular economy coordinator has now been fixed, and she is the first, I would say, circular coordinator in all of Sweden in a procurement unit. And with that said, I will leave the floor to you, Johanna.
Yes, and I will talk really briefly about our process and how we work with getting circularity into that. And as you all know, it is really important to have the relevant expertise represented throughout the procurement process. And here collaboration is a key success factor. And the core team for us usually consists of the procurer, who is the project lead. And then we have sustainability coordinators, as Emma has talked about, and also the reference group, which is representatives from the different departments that will be buying and using the product or service. And we use circular tools throughout the procurement process. And this is something that we have worked with since around 2020. And it's a continuous work. So we add new things and we update what we have when needed. And to give you some examples here, so early on when we are discussing overall needs and goals for the procurement, we also identify circular potential and ambition. And here we have a set of tools focused on getting the reference group involved, such as circular brainstorming and circular ambition exercises. We have a template with questions covering circular aspects that can be used like as a basis for the market engagement. And we document circular work in the procurement journal. And last year, my colleagues also developed a guide for sustainable procurement that everyone in the city can use. And here we have a section regarding circular criteria and examples of where and how these can be applied. And this is examples of how the templates look like. And yes, it's all in Swedish, since we work in Swedish. But what I can say is along the way, something that we've learned is that it's not constructive to have like a separate circular procurement process. We have to have circularity incorporated in our usual process and templates in order to make it happen. And by this way of working, we also make it accessible and easier to apply for every procurer. And teamwork during the contract management phase is as important or even more important, I would say, because with the procurement, we can create the foundation for circular buying behavior, but we don't see the effects until the contract is in place and used. And a key to success in this contract management phase is to involve both the users of the products and services and the suppliers to follow up on routines, how does repair work, maintenance, take-back, etc., and also further develop that. And sometimes the market cannot offer us a circular solution that lives up to our ambition at the point of contract start. So we therefore often add a criteria opening up for circular development during the contract period. And such circular development can, for example, result in the addition of spare parts, to pilot a new material in small scale, and other things. We also use our existing forums. So we have, for example, a buyers network that we use to engage, promote circularity, but also to reach a wider target group in the organization.
And we also reach this wider target group by communicating. And we communicate in our intranet. Here you see some news, some circular procurement news. We also did our own waste hierarchy ladder, as you see here, to be able to communicate circular purchasing. So not only the procurement, but also the purchasing. And to sum up a little bit, some landmarks. Yes, in 2018, we started our journey. We did first circular procurement for furniture. We had our trainings. 2020, the templates became CE approved. We also had other projects where a procurement officer got engaged. I know that Caroline is here. She's another one of the stars and at our procurement unit. We had a new environmental program. And yeah, last year we also won a Procura Plus award for circular science. So could we now say that circular economy is on everybody's lips? I would say that it is on many people's lips, but of course we have a lot of implementation to do. And as you all know, we're still in a very linear world, but definitely it has spread a lot during this 5 years. And just to sum up briefly before I give the floor to Martin, some tips to go circular: start with something easy. That is likely to become a success. Don't try to do the perfect circular tender. And the same with monitoring. We talked about it last session. It's difficult, but try to monitor what is there. Behavior change aspect, we haven't focused much on that, but it's also very important to think about the user phase. And of course, communicate your victories and communicate your monitoring, etc. And with that said, I will give the floor to you, Martin.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen. Great. Just stop my watch so the time doesn't fly away from me. In Kolding Municipality, we...
Could you use presented mode, Martin?
Yeah, sure. Better? Yeah, okay. Just have to find my slide. Yeah, oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. In Kolding, we kind of used a systemic approach or systems approach for procurement. Of course, we've done the pilots and the monitoring, but when it came to implementing this into the organization, one of the first things we did was that we wanted to really get to know the landscape that we operated in. And when I say one of the first things, I also mean that this is something that we've been doing continually and probably will continue to do. But it's really important that we know what system we are trying to change before we even start. So we had to get an overview about organizational strategies and goals and identify key stakeholders and what their priorities were in the individual departments, finding ambassadors and champions and finding out what kind of agendas they had. Because only when we have this overview, we can effectively start implementing the idea of sustainability in the right places. So we need to also identify the areas that were lacking in expertise and find out where we needed to fill some roles. And as you see from the timeline on the slide, we began that work in 2019, where 2 department managers kind of got together and said, we really need a sustainability coordinator. How do we do that? And they co-financed my colleague Stella, who is in another department, and her work turned into a project group, which was consolidated and got a steering group, and then they developed the sustainability strategy, and that later turned into spawning a strategy for sustainable procurement and resource management. And then we found out we had another area that was that need to be filled, and that was my colleague Eben now, who we hired also through ProCirc project to be a sustainability procurement coordinator, and that's mainly what she does. And her great work have turned into another resource group, which is supposed to support the a management forum, more or less, from that are tasked with disseminating this sustainability procurement and resource management strategy in all the departments in the municipality. So this seems like a lot of work, but it's basically the same thing we do every time. We find out what you really need for this to happen, and then we fill the gap. Because only when something really exists in the name or the form of a department, a brief, a position, or a group, it gets legitimacy, and that is really important, because then it has to be a thing, right? Then after getting to know the land, we have to prepare the soil, and we were lucky enough to get this great quote from one of our managers, that some people are interested in climate change and some people like football, and we really have to think about that, because that is actually one of the main takeaways from all of this. We can never impress upon people how important this work is if they do not understand why. We really have to communicate, find out what are people's interests. If they like football, we have to communicate why climate change impacts football. It's really difficult to play in soggy fields where grass won't grow properly. And to do that, I've included a few links from our main approaches here have been from design journeys through complex systems and building better systems, some gamifications strategies to find out what kind of feelings do you really want to awaken in these people to get them to take action, because that is the main thing. We can do all the strategies we want in the world. If people don't take action, it's not for much anyways. Then when we have an idea of what people want on their agenda, we need to plant some strong seeds, and we have done that in ProCirc with the cases, and we're also continuing that work in all kinds of tenders and existing procurement contracts on coffee and washing of and rental workwear, funeral services, all kinds of stuff. Sustainability is applicable to everything, more or less. So that's great. And these strong seeds also serve as the basis for our communication. When people say, you can't do that, we say, well, we have done that, so you actually can. And that's a really strong argument. Then, of course, there's companion planting, that you need to put the right people together or to support each other, and not always people who think alike, but also people who think opposite, to help them grow together. That is, yeah, we haven't quite gotten that far yet in cutting, but the theory behind system innovation is that when you put people in networks together, you can actually grow your agendas beyond the organization. And of course, we do that right now in ProCirc, but we would also like to do it locally outside of the municipality. And we're getting there. The agenda is on the rise. Then, of course, we have to facilitate good habits and collaboration. And the drawing you see here is actually from our sustainability and sustainable procurement and resource management strategy. And as I see, it's really simple. This is like the basis for communication. We want to people, every time they have a need, they have to think about, do I really need this, or can I do my job in another way? Can I reduce my purchase? Can I reuse or repair something we already have, or can I buy new? And we are currently on different in different areas, trying to implement strategies, and no, not strategies, more like step-by-step guides to what to do on furniture, for instance. Because it has to be easy. One of the main barriers for circular procurement is that it's really difficult and requires a lot of cognition, and most people don't have that in their day-to-day operations. So we have to do a lot of that work for them, so it becomes easy. And also about collaborating to overcome barriers is a very strong way to push this agenda forward, because people have a tendency to say, that doesn't work in my area or in my job or some such thing. But when you have a workshop about how we can overcome the barriers, about implementing sustainability into this particular area, you kind of turn that argument on its head and force people to consider what they can actually do. And it's very strong. So workshops is a very strong point for us in our work. And our main takeaways from all of this, I summed all of it up in the last 2 slides. First, we have to create the conditions for growth, and we do that by creating a higher meaning and communicating how people impact the world around them, and that they're actually part of something bigger, that is not just their small contribution, but it's like actually part of something large. We have to secure dynamism in the organization, make sure that the agendas we try to implement with sustainability actually aligns with the agendas of the organization. This feeds into the next one: how sustainability creates power. How does it do that? Well, it creates power through organizational robustness, by savings, by public opinion in politics, by employee retention. Find out what are these specific points that the key stakeholders are interested in, and then leverage that. Then, of course, we also have to increase urgency. One of the main tenets of gamification is that positive feelings like dynamism and power and meaning is all well and good in the long run, but to get people to get going, to take action right now, you need to create a sense of urgency, and that's also important. Then, of course, you have to nurture the change, promote interest, make it easy, approachable, and actionable, and satisfying if possible. Increase knowledge, because lots of studies show that increases possibility and opportunity. And then, of course, increase legitimacy, as I talked about in the beginning. And that can be everything, like political approvals, team strategies, set points on the recurring agendas and stuff like that. So, yeah, that is it from us. And now Alexandra will take over and show you how to make an incredible workshop.
Thank you, Martin. I'll just try to share my screen.
Yeah, I'll try to not share mine.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, many organizations recognize and embrace the importance of sustainable and circular procurement. Employees work with sustainability principles from within, or goals are set from above, yet very often it remains a challenge to translate circular ambitions into systematic actions and a thorough transformation. For this reason, within ProCirc, with the help of Studio Day, a guidance was for organizing a change management workshop was developed. We already had 2 workshops in procurement departments, and reactions have been very positive. And this is why I want to briefly show you how this works. During the workshop, a change management methodology will help a procurement team identify the behavioral bottlenecks associated with a circular goal. Learning from these bottlenecks and opportunities, the team will be guided in defining customized and hands-on actions to remove these barriers. At the end of the workshop, the team will have a draft action plan. This action plan is used in conjunction to the procurement transformation canvas to make the circular procurement transformation a success. This slide is to show you where we situate ourselves in Natasha Klein's framework Emma already explained. People shape organizations and organizations shape people. An organization is composed of individuals, each with their own personality, abilities, attitudes, and values. Each of these characteristics has its qualities, but also its pitfalls. We must learn not only to assess these individual characteristics well, but also to deal with them appropriately so they would contribute maximally to achieving of individual and collective goals. The theoretical idea behind the methodology is the COMB model, a widely used model that identifies what must change for a behavior change intervention to be effective. The model identifies 3 factors that must be present for any behavior to be effective: capability, opportunity, and motivation. Only when all 3 are present, there is a solid foundation for behavior change and the organization's goals can be achieved. This is a schematic presentation of actions towards behavioral change. A first step is to be able to formulate your targets and then to clearly see what target behavior is necessary to reach your goals and also what bottlenecks are possible in reaching the desired target behavior. And finally, to address challenges and provide the necessary support. The first exercise aims to get a good understanding of the organization and the sub-processes that are in place. Also, the decision lines are mapped out and the group discusses the current bottlenecks in the process that hold the team from reaching the sustainability objectives. By doing this, you set a scene for an open and collaborative discussion. And this is where the COMB model becomes relevant, because for each role and process, you will discuss how the participants' roles feel about the sustainability or circular objectives that have been set. And to facilitate this discussion, a set of emojis is available. The participants are asked to select 3 emojis, which are, according to them, the most appropriate ones to express the emotions of the subject's roles related to the circular procurement objective. During the workshop, we saw that it really worked as an icebreaker to get the conversation started. The participants will then define for each role which behavior is desired to achieve the goal. And for this purpose, 6 sheets with desired behaviors are laid on the floor, and the entire group is asked to select from their own perspective the behavior that is mostly needed and physically stand around the selected behavior displayed on the floor. From there, the conversation will start to gain more insights in what the participants believe is needed. Next, there will be a discussion on why a certain behavioral goal was chosen, and you will find out which actions could be agreed upon to enable the behavior. And then the facilitator will convert the actions into an action plan, defining actions for the department and roles involved, and return them to the participants. These actions contribute to the desired behavior change and ensure that circular procurement goals can be achieved. The methodology delivers achievable and practical actions where owners are defined and timely agreements are made. What is taken care of grows by making sure regular follow-up of the plan is foreseen with a focus on motivation and needed support. They will be of high importance to make the team grow throughout their circular procurement journey. I think we can all agree on the fact that change is difficult. And I would like to highlight some main takeaways, mainly from a recent interview I had with the head of a procurement department. I was told we as people have 2 ears and only 1 mouth, which means we have to listen twice as much as we speak. The importance of dialogue was really stressed. And through pilots, projects, and testing, you are really able to start shifting the aversion to change. Change can never take flight on its own merits. It has to be energized, or in other words, change in an organization does not just happen. In your organization, you need to look for ambassadors, early adapters, and you need to grab them and say, this is what we want to try once. And you can't say we are going from white to black now. You only must, not only you need a champion to be present within the organization, he or she must have enough power to get the organization off its usual course. Essentially, the same 2 things a vehicle needs: a person in the driver's seat and also a source of power. You try something small, step by step, and you let them discover the taste for themselves. And when the taste is discovered, it is that ambassador who will tell his colleagues, and that's how you get the ball rolling. Champion power consists of the ability to influence other people in the organization, specifically the ability to mobilize them for a change or to counter any resistance to change. As previously said by my colleagues, core elements for organizational change are cooperation, commitment, and a sense of ownership in the change process. The workshop guidance, together with many other interesting tools and guidelines, are accessible on the ProCirc website. It takes one person to get the ball rolling in an organization. Just get it started. And that brings us to our final slide. Oh, I was too quick. Well, thank you for joining our session from One Circular Pilot to Circular Economy on Everybody's Lips. On this slide, you can find our contact information. And next, we look forward to seeing you in a moment in the various breakout rooms, where we'll be happy to address your questions. And then I'll give the word back to Lieke.
Thank you. So for those of you who have been in my breakout group will have heard from me just now. For those of you that I haven't spoken to yet, my name is Peter Ramsey. I'm from an organisation called Business in the Community. We are a UK-based business membership organisation that engages business on a wide range of responsible business issues, including circular economy. And we are a partner in the ProCirc project, and we have been coordinating a work package which has been around transnational implementation, and that's basically about bringing organisations together to share and exchange knowledge and ideas on circular economy. One deliverable that has been introduced into the project in the final year, so we got, it was originally a 3-year project, and then we got an additional extension year with new deliverables. And within that extension year, we've been given a deliverable on joint statements of demand. And these essentially bring together a group of procurers to set out commitments and asks around circular economy, in particular product categories. Before I get into explaining more of that, I'm going to ask you to go to the Menti poll again. So Lieke, if you'd be able to share the details of how people can get onto that, perhaps you can go back to a previous slide with the QR code. We have focused the joint statements on 3 particular product categories, so I'd be really interested to see which of those the people on this call are interested in procuring or will be procuring over the next 5 years or so. So if you can go on to that, show which of the 3 categories you will be procuring. And then if it would be possible to bring this up on screen to see what the results are, that would be great. Okay, so furniture jumping into the lead by quite a lot. That's interesting. Clothing and EV chargers sort of neck and neck at the moment. Clothing starting to get a bit of a lead. So we'll keep that going. It'll be interesting for us to look at that after and to see which of you we can hopefully engage in these joint statements. But if we could go back onto my next slide now. I'm just going to run through basically how this fits into the bigger work plan of our project. So next slide, please. So this graphic is essentially looking at the clothing project we've been working on and showing how it fits in, how the joint statement of demand fits in with other ProCirc deliverables. So we began by developing a community of practice on professional clothing. And this is a community of practice that we as Business in the Community ran in the UK. And it's one of 18 communities of practice that ProCirc partners have delivered over the last 4 years. So through this, we brought together a group of procurers as well as a group of suppliers and the industry body for the professional clothing supply chain in the UK. And we ran a series of roundtable conversations and produced a report at the end of that, showing the key opportunities for circular procurement in professional clothing. We then supported a few of the a few of the organisations we as partners have engaged with to implement pilot projects on circular procurement. So to actually bring in asks and commitments into their procurement and into their tenders. So it was really interesting to see that. And then the next stage of the project is creating the joint statement of demand on professional clothing. And this is where we really look to scale up the impact that we have in the project and get a high number of procurers signed up to this joint statement. Next slide, please. So what is a joint statement of demand? Well, I guess one might think about it is that it sets out commitments, so it's a statement, that a group of buyers from signatory organisations will adopt, so it's a joint statement, as well as circular asks that procurers would expect to see their suppliers offering in the future, thereby making it a joint statement of demand. So the approach recognises that harnessing collective purchasing power can drive innovation and accelerate the shift to a circular future. But what are the benefits of being involved in this for a procurer? First of all, I think that set of asks that we've created helps to overcome the knowledge barriers that a lot of procurers have. So procurers are not experts in sustainability a lot of the time. Usually there are experts in sustainability in their organizations, but they have a limited amount of time. And by bringing together this group of procurers and engaging with suppliers, we've set out a set of asks, essentially showing what good looks like for the 3 product categories that we've been focused on. Secondly, it overcomes a fear of being in it alone and being a lone voice. By joining up with a group of procurers, it provides a sense of community, a sense of being in it together, and provides sort of a forum where procurers can try to overcome their barriers together, keep sharing best practice and exchanging ideas. And finally, it creates the conditions for suppliers to invest and innovate, to create more circular product and bring that onto market. And I saw a comment earlier on saying sometimes it's a real struggle to find circular products on the market to buy. And that ultimately is what we hope the joint statement of demand will influence. But this does require a high number of procurers, of course, to sign up to it. Next slide, please. So to run through the timeline of how we've created the joint statement of demand, firstly, we scoped the product categories as a partnership that we wanted to focus on. And you now know the 3 that came out on top, being clothing, furniture, and electric vehicle charges. We then created a working group of procurers who buy that particular product category. With that group, we determined the scope that we'd be looking at, so whether we'd be focused in on one particular product or whether we'd keep it more broad and high level. We worked on creating that set of asks and commitments that would be included in the joint statement. We carried out market engagement, so engaging with suppliers, with industry experts to get their input and to help us think about what the possible futures for these categories would be. And we're sort of now at the point of agreeing the final drafts and launching these joint statements. So the furniture and clothing ones we're hoping to launch in the next couple of weeks. The EV charges one will be a bit after. And then, of course, we're looking to grow the signatories and get as many as we can committed. Next slide, please. So just a sneak peek then of some of the commitments and asks that are included within these joint statements of demand. Firstly, furniture, as we saw in the poll we did, is one that a lot of procurers are really interested in. Yeah, the European furniture market is about 5 billion and expected to keep growing over the next 5 years. We know that on the whole, a lot of furniture ends up going to landfill after use, 80 to 90% by one estimate. And that is ultimately what we're looking to change. The group that have been shaping this particular joint statement have been really keen that we get to a place where we end up issuing circular tenders for furniture, and we try to get away as far as possible from buying new furniture. So very much along the lines of what Christian was talking about in his pilot earlier on. So looking to build specifications and criteria that will reward circular services. We also, within the joint statements, have commitments about addressing some of these implementation barriers that have been talked about, engaging with colleagues and overcoming organisational challenges. Next slide, please. The professional clothing one, yeah, again, it's one that a lot of procurers are interested in. And I do want to stress at this point that although a lot of the partners in ProCirc are public procurers, we're also engaging with private procurers through these joint statements as well. So keen to get private procurers on board too. The commitments and asks within professional clothing are fairly similar, but this particular group of procurers was keen that we have a minimum weighting for sustainability aspects, and importantly, a minimum weighting of at least 10% given to circular aspects when evaluating tenders. We ask the clothing is designed with circular principles in mind, ask that infrastructure is provided to enable take back and reuse, and ask that measures are taken to reduce the number of new garments that need to be produced for the contract and to reduce microfiber pollution. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over at this point to Emma, who you heard from earlier, who's been leading on the electric vehicle charges joint statement.
Thank you, Peter. So I think this product category is kind of different from the other ones. We haven't seen so much of circular and sustainable criteria within EV chargers, since it's perceived as green, because we need to build this infrastructure and we need to build it very fast. But we think it's important to address this topic since it may contain conflict minerals. And of course, we want to prolong the life of these products as much as we can. And as you can see here, in about 7 years, there is an estimate, and we need around 3 million of charging points, public charging points in the EU. And today you can see UK and Norway are one of the countries with most public charging points, and they are not even close to that number. Yes, and some commitments and asks we have been talking about. Explore the potential of sharing infrastructure. Of course, we as a municipality don't have to have the charging point for ourselves. Also clear commitments to implement leading charging standards and origins of metals and minerals, that we should not avoid conflict minerals, but also use X% of reused material. Over to you, Peter.
Thanks, Emma. Next slide, please. So that has been, a bit of a whirlwind introduction, really, to the joint statements. But don't worry, because we will be holding meetings, events specifically on each of these joint statements. We can get, we'll have a lot more time to go into the detail of what's included, the benefits of becoming a signatory to the joint statement, and the practicalities around doing so. So there will be a market dialogue event, so hearing from the suppliers for the electric vehicle charges on the 24th of April, and then 25th and 27th. We will be hopefully sharing the final draft of the furniture and workwear joint statements, and trying to encourage as many as possible to become signatories of those. We'll share the links to join these afterwards, and please do sign up to hear more and to get involved. Thank you, and back to Lika.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter, and also Emma. Very brief indeed, but still a good introduction, I think. So yes, the links to the in-depth meetings, they're also on our website. So that's in general. If you like to know more about what was discussed today, then please visit the website. But we also have on the 11th of May in Brussels a live event. It's unfortunately not hybrid, so it's only live, and registration is open. So the registration link can also be found on the website. And then, yes, it's only to me to thank you very much for your participation and your interaction in the chat and the very short breakout session. Please let us know what you thought about this event. You can use the Mentimeter. The final question is on the evaluation of this online event. And yes, thank you very much again for participating and joining us.
Thank you.